right, welcome folks. Thank you for joining us today on our third Ancestral Astrology question and answer session. So hopefully all of you have had a chance to watch the third video. We're going to do a little bit of checking in around that today, and we are going to have an opportunity to do the breakout group portion with whoever's joined today, just so you get a sense of connection with some other folks in the class and have an opportunity to share anything that might have come up about the aspect pattern or really anything. I like to make some space to connect outside of the Facebook group, which is a little bit of a strange forum. But first, I just want to check in about the eclipse, because I was noticing as I rewatched the video that last year we also had a full moon eclipse in the Scorpio Taurus polarity. And so I'm just curious how that went for folks. So I think we'll do that in chat. So if you have anything to share about your experience with the eclipse, you can go ahead and type that into the chat, so people can see other people's experiences. And I also want to make an announcement that I want to apologize, because the Vimeo video for session 3 did not have closed captions, and Christina and I were not able to figure out why that happened. Something that's really important for me, because I depend on closed captions to understand a lot of things. But what I did was I uploaded that video to YouTube, and it put the link in your Google Drive folder. So for those of you who also need closed captions, just take a look at module 3, and there will be a link to a YouTube video that has closed captions. So, but apologies that wasn't ready for you this week, because it's just sometimes technology can be so frustrating. So I'm not seeing a whole lot. Let's see, there's one chat. Okay, so a couple of people from Eclipse. I'm going to read this out for the benefit of folks who might be joining by video later. Abigail says the eclipse happened in conjunction with a very fraught emotional US election. Yeah, absolutely. That was an interesting one. And then Jennifer Lewis says, I took the eclipse as a pause and did reset my altars and crystal grids. Awesome. Yeah, it's a great time to initiate change. Or you don't even have to initiate, really, because it just kind of seems to happen. But it might be helpful to reflect just back on last year. And the eclipse last year took place at 26 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio, and this one took place at 14. So it was lighting up, probably for most people, the same houses, maybe not everybody. And depending on if you have planets in the fixed sign, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo, it may have been activating similar different parts of your chart, but it has an overall very kind of resonant message, that exchange between Taurus and Scorpio, of kind of that Taurus end of things, of keeping kind of a steady beat, staying comfortable, staying grounded, and taking kind of a look at how you live your life according to your values. And then across the way, we've got that Scorpio message, which is about going deeper and transforming and shedding the skin of the old in order to step in to the new, and reflecting on your current value system. So, we had Uranus in the mix, we had Saturn in the mix. This eclipse was much more dynamic than last year's. There was a lot more outer planet activity, but I did find it interesting that we happen to be doing the third module at that eclipse point. So if nobody has anything else to share in terms of the eclipse portion, I've got one more person here. Sarah says, I'm still purging per the earlier Scorpio solar eclipse. Last year it hit my moon and I ended up going to Portugal. Ooh, super cool. That's fun. That seems like a very interesting trip. And Eva says, I have my moon conjunct Uranus in fixed Leo opposing my Chiron in Aquarius, 12th house, which has kept the extent of the wounding of my inner child hidden from me. Wow. Well, I'm hoping that, and that's super interesting that a lot of times you see that inner child call for attention around Leo planet or fifth house activation. So that is, and the 12th house is such a hidden house. So it seems like there may have been some healing opportunities there to kind of illuminate some of those issues. And, if you can't see the wound, it's really hard to heal it. So that's one of the benefits of an eclipse like this, is you kind of get a little bit of a wake up. Oh, cool, Eva. All right. Well, that's a perfect bridge then. Let's see. I don't want to put you on the spot, Eva, but if you or anybody else would like to share your art, you can either talk about it, you can show it and talk about it, or you can just show it. You don't need to talk about it. But anybody who'd like to do that, you can either raise your hand or unmute. And I want to make some space for that to happen, because that was a really beautiful part of last year. Let's see. I'm just going to check and see. Okay. Abigail, raised your hand. Okay, Abigail, sorry, I just saw that hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute. I'll ask you to unmute. Maybe that'll help. There you go. Yay. All right.
I colored this into my journal, just mostly colors. I didn't have a lot of time. I did put that on pause, and I put some music on, and it took me 10 minutes to put the music on and find my crayons. So I took a little more time, and I did some writing. And there's a lot of sadness for me about what I'm exploring, and the word forgiveness came forward. I have been doing a little work with Chiron, and how my Chiron links up with some ancestors. That's very new for me. I don't know a lot about Chiron. And what I wrote, the journaling I wrote, was also really important to me. It was sad, but ended on something kind of happy. I wrote, life is so deadly serious, and we do die, and then what? We open like flowers. So I wrote that, and my Chiron is in the 12th house and has been really active. So I was glad I wrote that last part. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Abigail. Yeah, no, that's beautiful with the Chiron piece. And it is interesting because I don't know if you had a chance to see the video, but we did talk about Chiron last time. And I have found it fascinating to see really powerful links between in the family lineage around Chiron. And it one of the things about Chiron that I've been working with a little bit lately is like Chiron, is a centaur, so half man, half horse. And one of the pieces that sometimes gets left out about Chiron is that part of what we learn from its placement in our chart or transits that we might have, at our Chiron return when we're between 50 and 51, is we learn about how to kind of integrate, mediate the relationship between our animal wild self or instinctive self, the horse, their power, our kind of animal power, and our human self. And part of the chironic wound can be when we stifle that instinctive animal wild wisdom and prioritize the human piece. And it can also, I think, be vice versa, when you're just in your instincts and you don't have kind of the mediation of civilization, you're just acting out. So that may be something to take a look at just in your family lineage, of how that kind of archetypal story might play out And you can also take a look back when you were 50 or 51. I'm assuming, that you passed that age, but you maybe, you may not have yet. And look at your family members who have the Chiron linkages, what was happening for them at 50, 51, because Chiron return is a very sort of profound rite of passage. And if you look at some of the themes that were coming up in their lives at that time and compare them to themes happening in your life around that time, you can get a deeper understanding of how Chiron operates in the family lineage. So I just wanted to offer that up to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a question, if Chiron is a centaur, what is the relationship with Chiron and Sagittarius then? I mean, they both have centaur.
Yeah, good question. And it's funny because Chiron is, how do I put that? Astrologers have only really started working with Chiron in the early 70s. Barbara Handclough was one of the first people to write a book about Chiron. And interestingly enough, around the time Chiron, not so much was discovered, but we began to work with Chiron, there was a lot of renewed interest in so-called alternative healing methods. That, that's something, the word chiropractic comes from Chiron. And Chiron, the myth of Chiron is Chiron was known to teach many of the Greek heroes things like herbalism, astrology, all those alternative healing methods that were actually considered to be medicine back at that time. So, so long way around to answer your question is that there's never been a concretely decided rulership for Chiron. Some astrologers have said Chiron rules Sagittarius, and others have said Virgo. And so there may be a co-rulership there, which is, a little bit strange. But so if indeed, and it makes a lot of sense for me that Chiron would rule Sagittarius, then it's Chiron would be Sagittarius's ruler, and so that would be the fuller embodiment of some of those Sagittarius themes. So hope that makes a little bit of sense.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else just want to open up the door for anyone else who might feel called to share? And one more thing I want to just say, Abigail, I hope that that you felt some sense of healing with your kind of inner child relationship to the art there.
I did appreciate that. Yeah, my Chiron is in Capricorn, and so I think I have more of the responsibility and less of the wildness. So thank you for encouraging us to take a little time and contact that inner self.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, I think I see Jennifer's actual physical hand going up. You can unmute, Jennifer. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sorry, I just wanted to share. I do soul collage. So I did a soul collage card for the eclipse and just sort of let it happen. But this is a stone circle, like from the United Kingdom. National Geographic had a really beautiful issue lately. But there's a woman here doing ceremony with candles in like sand and dirt. And when I reflected on this card, it just felt like such a as above, so below kind of idea that came through in this card for the eclipse. So it was just kind of fun to play, and just like with soul collage, you just let the images come. So I just wanted to share that.
That's awesome. I love that. Very, very cool. Yeah. I'm curious if you will perhaps over the next little bit, if there will be some kind of emerging just messages that come out of that art and that may have some ancestral kind of information for you on that one. It's funny, I love when people allow themselves to fully express and just don't worry about, kind of take off the logical brain and put it aside when you're doing art and just kind of let it come out. The message may not be obvious at first, but sometimes it kind of emerges slowly and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't see that right away. It's so in my face. So that was the symbols that I saw on that card were really lovely. So I love what you did there.
Yeah, I do want to add, it's interesting that you say that because I hadn't actually thought of it until you said it. For my 50th birthday, which was a few months ago, I went back to Scotland where there's a ton of like stone circles, and I went there and touched all the circles. The one in that photo is not one that I actually went to, but that is where I have ancestral land. My one grandfather was born there. So I hadn't actually thought of that till you just mentioned that. So
Very cool, very cool. That's why I saw that. It's like sometimes, I know I found myself teaching a class or talking to somebody, and in that moment I say something and I'm like, oh, that's it. Like sometimes your brain doesn't know, but your intuition will speak it. And also just interesting, you mentioned that just turned 50, because you may want to take a look at the Chiron connection also. All right, anybody else? And I think Eva, I see a real hand. All right, go ahead.
If you don't mind, I have a question about Chiron, because Chiron is in my 6th house and it's an air sign. I was wondering if I've looked at healing always for my body and alternative medicine, and as you're saying, he represents. But I was just this week, it occurred to me, could it mean mental health?
Yeah, I would equate mental health more with a Chiron connection to the moon. Chiron,
Yes.
yeah, Chiron.
And I have them.
Oh, okay. You have it. You do
Yeah.
have a connection to the moon.
I do. I have Chiron opposing Uranus and no, actually I don't. No.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, because remembering that the 6th house is ruled by Virgo, and
Okay.
Virgo is an earth sign. And so that is, I mean, there's always that mind, body, spirit connection. If your mental health is suffering, your physical health is likely to be, not always, but it's likely to be influenced as well. And, vice versa. If you're having a lot of physical issues, that's going to affect your mental health. So in that way, yes, there's a connection, but I wouldn't immediately associate mental health issues with Chiron in the 6th, unless there's a moon connection, or if there was indeed a moon Uranus Chiron connection, I would look at that too. A lot of times people who have moon Neptune, moon Uranus, it's just they're so highly sensitized that maintaining high levels of mental health in the current state of the world can be particularly challenging.
Okay.
So there, you got to have some extra support if you have that kind of sensitivity, I think.
I do. This is, I think it was more emotional health that came up for me when I made this. Yeah, it was, I enjoy watercolors, so I had the supplies and I put wet on wet and then just put some strokes of color. And then the paper just had a mind of its own, and this is what it did. So the next day after it dried, I put a crayon in my left non-dominant hand and I drew my family. And what I thought was interesting was I held the hand of my grandmother, who I never met, and had her holding the hand of my mother. And when we did aspects this week, I don't have any planets that I share with my mother. I don't have anything at all. With my grandmother, I share Chiron. And so what I thought about this was that there was a lot of emotion. I have an aspect that's also passed on to my daughters is the moon and squaring or conjunct or in opposition. No, yeah, in opposition to Neptune. And I think I was very idealistic. And I thought that my family would be all peace, love, and it wasn't. And but now I can see the beauty in it, and that I signed it, to me, shows that a healing. I feel a pride and an ownership being part of this line
Mm.
that I don't think I did before.
Mm.
And I felt that I wanted to put a piece of tape across here, and this was definitely going to be in grays. And then I realized afterwards it's the strong foundation I have. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a string of pearls.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that the pearls of wisdom. So I did receive gifts from my family. Maybe I haven't discovered them all yet through this astrology work that I'm doing. And also the elements. My grandmother is water. Cardinal signs. My grandmother's cardinal in water. I'm cardinal in air. And my mother is cardinal in earth.
Beautiful.
I think so.
Thank you so much, Eva.
Thank you.
I can just feel, all the care and attention that you put into that. And it's really interesting that you mentioned the cardinal connection. You may not have the planets in common, but your pattern seems to be the modalities. So there, and I remember you talking about that before, like how there was such a strong cardinal pattern there. So that's, that really diving deep into the cardinal modality and exploring how that manifests for you, and as you said, in the gifts, the challenges. It's funny with the modalities too. I just want to say a little bit about that, because that is your pattern, it seems, at least in the mother's lineage. Maybe in the father's lineage there's something else going on, but the modalities I find fascinating, and they're not something that I really worked with until a little bit later in my sort of astrological journey. But once I hit on them, I was like, ooh, this is really cool. And because we've got the elements of earth, air, fire, water, but nature is so much more complex than that. There's not just one kind of earth, there's not just one kind of water, one kind of fire, one kind of air. And so to me, the modalities are a really beautiful way of teaching us about nature. They teach us some of, there's so many more variations even than the modalities, but they teach us that there is variation within the elements, that, there's many different types of earth. How does earth manifest? And so in that way, to me, it really deepens our connection with nature and our understanding of ourselves as being part of nature. We're in our charts, it shows you, this is my elemental makeup. And then if you get into the modalities, and this is the particular way that I express that elemental makeup. So hopefully folks will look at the modalities through that lens as well, as how it expresses our connection to nature.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eva, for sharing that. That was really lovely. And I can see how much heart you put into it. So, anyone else have anything to share in the realm of the art? And again, if you don't want to show what you did, or you just want to talk about it, that's totally fine too. Okay, looks like people are good with that element. So before we get into questions and answers, I would actually like to put you into the breakout groups, and again, sharing about if you found anything interesting in the realm of aspects. If you didn't find anything interesting in the realm of aspects, just what you've been up to in your journey with the ancestral astrology, where you're at with it. So we've got 14 people here, 13 people actually, I'm counting myself. So I think we're going to do 4 4, 8, 12. We'll break up into groups of like 3 or 4. Yeah, I think that's good. And each person take about 2 to 3 minutes. So I'll bring y'all back at about 12 after, or in 12 minutes. So it's 25 after my time, 37 roundabout. So, and if you don't want to be in a breakout group, that's totally fine. I get it that not everybody's into sharing or into, the breakout format. So you can just, mute and take a little break, get a snack, whatever you want to do. But here we go. Okay, and also I would just encourage you to think about any questions you might have, so that we can address those when we come back. So we are going to do 4 breakouts. There you go. Oops, I made a mistake, sorry. I'm just gonna do this. Okay. 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're back. So hopefully had some time to share, connect, compare notes. I want to just see if anybody from any of the groups has anything that they would like to talk about that came up in the groups that might be beneficial for everybody to hear about.
So I just want to say how interesting that me and Room One, Lori and KS, were sharing how we're seeing this through. I mean, obviously our lineage, but specifically KS. Right before we got called in, was talking about how she is the only one in her family that is the Sagittarius, and she sees religion and spirituality. She's more spiritual. Her mom is more religious, and she sees that. And I'm just pointing out and looking at how she is here to kind of break that mold. And she has a way of connecting with the ancestors and how beautiful the work that she is here to do. And I was wanting her to finish that. And it's just really fascinating work. I haven't done the artwork just yet. I don't think she has either. But seeing the elements, just that alone has been so eye-opening. Like I had a client earlier where I was doing a reading for her and she wanted to know some career stuff. And so in the career stuff, what I specifically tell people is that as much as I can tell you what your talents are and what direction to go in, what I specialize in specifically is to help entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs that if you're not healing these things, if you're not addressing the self-sabotage and the patterns that keep coming up, you're never going to be able to actualize the business that feels purposeful and aligned for you. I can give you the money, but it wouldn't even matter because you need to address these things. And this class, this course has been so incredibly eye-opening, but it has deepened the way in which I want to show up for my clients, that it's like, I am so grateful for our time. I'm so indebted to what you've been teaching us. And it's just so incredible how astrology just continues to blow me away with its wisdoms and its teaching. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's awesome. I love to hear how the work that you've been doing and insights you're having is already spilling over, kind of like an overflowing cup, to be shared with your clients. That ripple effect is just, wow, who doesn't live for that, right? Feeling that sense of meaning that that you're having an impact. That's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing that. Really lovely to hear. And that Sagittarius theme, wow, right? Like just in the Jackson chart. And I know I've seen it in my own family line. Like, it's so interesting how it kind of goes through the generations and transform its manifestation, can go from that kind of fanatical religious piece to just a sense of deep meaning and strong belief systems to, having family members who are, want to know everything, want to go everywhere, the searchers, the wanderers, the pilgrims, the gypsies. So yeah, it's really really special work. So thank you all for sharing it with me. And I think we had Abigail next. Do you want to unmute yourself, Abigail? And then if anybody else wants to share, we'll go to them next.
Yeah, in our group, we didn't come up with anything about aspects, but most of us were following that scent that you talked about, Fern, when you pick up a scent to keep following it. I know for myself, I've been exploring my mother's lineage, my mother's lineage, in particular, one ancestor who was a cousin, didn't have children, but there's been some nightmares for me and some difficulty. And now at my more advanced age, I'm actually in using these astrological tools. I too am really grateful to be able to explore that. I think part of the fear for me is I have Pluto conjunct my south node in Leo in my 7th and 8th house. It crosses that line. And I have Chiron in my 12th house. I think there is some pain from the past that's hard to explore. A lot of Cancer. I have a Cancer moon. My mother has a Cancer moon, and her mother had a Cancer moon. And right now my moon is being transited by Pluto, is in a transit opposition with Pluto. So I think it's a good time probably to open up to that. This ancestor that I'm exploring has her moon conjunct Chiron. My Chiron is conjunct her north node and her Venus in Capricorn. So I'm seeing a lot of these connections, no aspects. But the question that I had, and then Nicole addressed a little bit, is I'm seeing the number 27 come up repeatedly. I'm born on the 27th. My daughter's born on the 27th. I have a granddaughter whose sun is at 27 degrees. My moon's at 27 degrees. They're all different signs, but I'm wondering if you have any comment on seeing a particular, I'm also seeing some 28s and some 26s, but particularly a lot of 27s. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I first of all, I have to say I don't really work a lot with a lot of people work with like repeating numbers. They see numbers a lot, and that's not an area of my specialty. But what I would suggest is that you consult. There's books, and you can Google for this. There's one of the other students here may have a resource. There are books that will interpret every degree, right? And so I believe there is a book that just looks at like the meaning of the number 27 in astrological terms. So that's where I would refer you to on that. You can also work with it numerologically, and that 2 + 7 is 9. And taking a look at I'm just going to mute because I'm hearing some feedback. Taking a look at the numerological meaning of 9, you can explore that via the tarot. The 9 in tarot is the Hermit card. So looking at it in that end, but I definitely think, there are no coincidences. There's a synchronicity, and having those numbers repeat, there's some kind of symbolic message. and it seems to be a clue for you to follow. So I encourage you to track that clue down. You know, you may be somebody who, after finding information about that, is able to offer what you've learned to other, you know, searchers who are looking at their ancestral lines and seeing that number pop up again and again. So yes, thank you, Abigail. Anybody else want to have any sharings from the groups? Anything come up around aspects? Oh, okay. See, Nicole's got her hand up. Go ahead, Nicole.
Hi. I think I mentioned probably a week or two ago that my son is, both my sun and my Mercury are square, are not square. They are the triangle. I don't know why I can't mention that. What is that? Trine. There we go. They're trine.
Grand
Yeah,
trine.
my sun is trine. Both my sun and Mercury are trine, my Chiron.
Okay.
And I shared in the group that my mother's Chiron in Capricorn is conjunct my sun in Capricorn. And so I was looking over this week, I just looked a little bit at, I looked for the first time aspects of my father's chart, and his sun is sextile his Chiron. And so it's interesting, just like with these aspects, like his Chiron aspect is a sextile. My mother's Chiron is square her Jupiter, and then that kind of formed these two trines for me, and kind of working, you know, with the abstraction of those shapes. I've been thinking about that. And then when you mentioned how Sagittarius and Chiron, this connection, have been coming up just in this call, I looked at both their Chiron and Chariklo placements. Mine are conjunct both in Taurus, by the way, but my mom's, hers is in, her Chiron's in Capricorn, her Chariklo is in Sagittarius, and my father's Chiron is in Capricorn and his Chariklo is in Sagittarius. Because they're like a few, you know, years apart, but just to think about how, and I'm, you know, I'm a Capricorn, which is Saturn ruled, and now Jupiter. I have a, sorry, I'm like, my words all over the place, but I have a Sagittarius stellium. And so I'm very much like this Saturnian and Jupiterian person. And my Saturn and Jupiter are exactly conjunct in Libra.
Ah,
And so it's like just talking about this is kind of like created this narrative for me to kind of understand my chart a little bit better, and you know who's contributed to what. Long-winded way.
yeah, thank you for sharing that, Nicole. And I think that one thing to note about that one is that Saturn is exalted in Libra. And so just, I think there's definitely, with all that Capricorn kind of, you know, connections, the Chiron in Capricorn, your Capricorn sign, the exaltation of Saturn in Libra, which brings another Capricornian influence, that definitely seems like a nice, juicy kind of thread to track as well. Yeah, I know. It's so funny. It's so amazing to me. I never, you know, get over how rich the connections are in the family chart. It's just, and every family has their own signature. It's just amazing to me. It's like the, you know, snowflake or fingerprint. There's just such amazing intelligence and, you know, life. So, and every time I hear one of you share about it, it's just fascinating. Okay, so Eva asked, and let's, this is a good segue. Thank you, Eva. Let's shift into gears a little bit. Any questions and answers folks have, you can type that in the chat, or make a little bit more space before we wrap up to unmute. But will we be teaching, talking more about Black sheep in a family? Yes, I'm pretty sure that the last class number 4, we get into the Black sheep piece. I can share a little bit about that now, but one of my favorite things about the Black sheep narrative is that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, when you find a Black sheep in your family line, whether it's you, you know, or a relative, your child, your mother, or whoever it is, that they've kind of been identified. That is often the point in a family line where the patterns start to shift. So you will often see a black sheep with either very different astrological signatures, or they will have the same astrological signature, but they take it in a really different way. So let's say, for example, we've got a Mars theme that emerges in a family line. And, maybe everybody's got Mars conjunct Pluto or something. Then all of a sudden you'll see the black sheep with, Mars in Libra or Mars conjunct Uranus. Something that takes that Mars and kind of swings the whole thing in another direction. Because what is a black sheep? A black sheep is somebody who's doing something different. They're kind of unearthing all the shadow stuff in a family. They're illuminating, they're awakening. And not to say the black sheep is like, the good guy, the good girl, whatever. There's definitely shadow components in the black sheep. The black sheep can be the one who's got a lot of addiction issues, that everybody gets to point the finger at, and they're doing it wrong, but they may be the receptacle for all the family shit, so to speak. So I wonder, Eva, if you have any specific questions about that black sheep piece.
My specific question was when I found that I had no overlaps with my mother, one overlap with my grandmother. I have no overlaps with my eldest brother, just a small one with a sister. So I'm just feeling unconnected.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about that because you did seem to identify the cardinal connection. And that is a connection.
That is a connection. Okay.
That is a connection there because, like in my family, for example, in one of my family lines, it's all mutable. And it may not be that, I've got some Sagittarius folks, and then I've got a lot of Virgo, I've got a little Sag, but sometimes you will just see that the connection is a modality,
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm, I'd have to look at your chart more specifically in relationship to your family members. But I kind of think maybe you're asking, how do you identify an astrological black sheep? And
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So to me, it's a combination of blending in what's happening in real life. If you already feel like you're a black sheep, if if everybody in your family is lawyers and you've decided to be an astronaut, and everybody in the family hates astronauts, that's kind of a black sheep signature. And then you can kind of track it in the chart, like, what is your knowledge about yourself in relationship to the family? And then how can you find that in the chart? That's kind of the easy way in. But
I don't think I have a concern.
Yeah.
Now that you put it that way, yeah. Like there's warmth in my relationships with my siblings. And if anybody, it would be my eldest brother, who has a lot of addictions, and he doesn't have shared planets, but that doesn't mean we don't have shared aspects. I could check that. But I was just I'm a beginner, so I just chose 3 generations of the women. I haven't branched out to siblings yet.
I gotcha. And I think it can be interesting, and that's one of the funny things when you do this is, like, when I've done charts, when I've done ancestral astrology readings for people, sometimes I will have to reach out to them and ask for more charts, because they may have picked their mother's line and there's not a whole lot of overlap there. Where the overlap is coming from is the father's line. And so their astrological sort of signature is being replicated from the father's line. That's what they're here to kind of take the story to the next step with. So if you're not finding something in one line, I absolutely encourage you to branch out and see if there's patterns in the other line, because they always show up. if you spread out far enough, you start to see some really amazing connection. Okay. Let's see. I got a couple questions in the chat. Got to put my glasses on. And let's see. So Nicole says, what are your thoughts about looking at astral placements or aspects in relation to reincarnation? Yeah. So first of all, that depends on, if you believe in reincarnation. A lot of us do. And that absolutely, I think, shows up a lot in relationship to the nodes. So if you have nodal overlap, I think you can really start to kind of build some stories about reincarnation connections in the family line. I also think when you have repeating birthdays, I know in my family, we have my mother's line, not my father's. There are so many repeating birthdays that come through the whole lineage that, and I'm talking like, day and month, not so much, obviously not the year, but, or a couple days off, but people who are born like their sons are within a degree or two of each other. To me, that's a reincarnation signature. It's like, pay attention, this energy is coming back. So whether it's not the same spirit or soul, I don't know, but there's definitely some interesting things in that one. Okay, let's see. Sarah was asking, Eva, do you know the degree of your mother's Aries sun with the South Node Aries? There may be a karmic connection there. Rosie says, what about a whole branch of black sheep in the family? That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would be curious. And I'm trying to imagine what that would look like. Maybe let's just to put it in really general terms, maybe like everybody in the family has been a teacher going back 5 generations, and then maybe one daughter decides to become a drug dealer or something, and then she's got every one of her kids and descendant is a drug dealer. So that's gonna bring that whole branch. Maybe they've all got a Pluto aspect, so it's time to integrate Pluto into the family line. And maybe a couple generations after, instead of being drug dealers, they become detectives, or healers. So just it's looking at how a family line begins to change and what the archetypes are, planet, sign, even house, if you've got it, that sort of reshape the story, the family story there. So we've got about 1 minute to go, and I want to do a little wrap up. I just want to, if you have not been able to do the homework yet from last week, if you can, encourage you to do that, because it will help with next week when we start to bring a family story together. So if you can access a family story from a family member, it helps to have somebody older. It's not always possible, of course, but you can just add more information into the bigger ancestral story. And if you don't have that resource at hand, of course, you can sort of look back on what you do know about your family history and shape a little bit of your own story, because we're going to be using all this as we head into our last week to kind of bring some of the threads together. So again, if folks have other thoughts, questions, things come up, put them into the Facebook group. And I will be on there watching things. Thank you again for joining today. The recording of this will be up, and I will look forward to continuing to connect with you all as we head into our last week. So take care. All right. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Bye-bye.